Waiting for the ding. It says it's going live, so hello folks. Hopefully we can see this. I will be doing my usual of multitasking, flipping through tabs to see if I can see the actual live stream broadcasting. But I'll keep talking as I'm doing that so that hopefully we keep it flowing. And I wanted to put this Hangout on as a kind of special edition to the usual reality chats that myself and Peter Howard do on a Wednesday night, but to include a special guest, somebody I've been wanting to talk to for a while because of the sheer amount of effort he's put into putting information out that we often talk about and covering a lot of those topics that certainly I feel are very, very much relevant at the moment to a lot of what's going on in this internet medium, whatever particular platform you happen to be on. This is YouTube and Google Plus at the moment, but as we know, that spreads all over the place in various ways. So I wanted to chat with Jeff, also known as New World Agenda. He's the name of his channel at the moment. Used to be Free Radio Revolution. And he's been working away at this, covering various topics, various approaches, various avenues of this encroaching agenda. We could give it so many different labels, but you know what I mean. So anyway, yes, I wanted to do this as a special broadcast as and when we got the chance to actually get together and talk. So it's a bit of an extra, and I feel that now I'm coming at it from the approach of beyond the boxes and beyond the labels and beyond the constant argumentation of the divisive tactics that are being used against us. This is beyond caliber. What we do here is beyond caliber. You cannot limit it to being within a gradation. So it is Excaliber. If you have any comprehension of that whole storyline, I'm not trying to claim it's got any connection to the Arthurian legends or anything like that, not at all, just to clear that up in case people think the title is implying that. It's not at all. I'm using that word as a deliberate descriptor to try and give it some fine edge of what is going on here, because we've got to be able to cut through this shit. There is so much shit being sprayed onto this internet medium at the moment. We need more and more people to be able to just objectively cut through it and gather as much evidential, factual reference limits that they can to be able to present that argument to people and to help them break down the bullshit that's out there. So yeah, just as an explanation of why it's got this title and why it's on at this time of night and why it is part of the reality chat, but it's something separate. Jeff, a while ago you were doing a hangout called We'll Do It Live with a few other people that you were regularly working with online. I think that could be a good reference point to start off with, because I think a lot of people maybe remember that environment and how much headway you made before the psyops come along to provide the wedges that created the fractures. So anyway, I'll shut up and let you speak for a bit. Right? Thank you for your patience.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Cookie, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's obviously an extremely important topic, and it's one that is something that I've been trying to wake up more people to. And it doesn't benefit me in any way, shape, or form to do this, other than, of course, what I'm really here for, which is to try to get to the truth of what's going on and trying to help people not fall down these incredible disinfo wells that are being created and fall for these psyops. So yeah, I did. When I started off, and people may not know, a lot of people probably don't know if they haven't been around in the truth scene that long. We started a group show called Free Radio Revolution, and that was about 4.5, nearly 5 years ago. And we just get together once a week and basically just shoot the shit about what was going on, talking about world events and stuff like that. And eventually that became kind of a difficult thing to keep going. So I went solo and started for quite a period I worked on my own, just purely by myself, which was actually a really smart thing to do. And then I made a lot of mistakes, I guess you could say. I mean, some of it is good and some of it's bad. What I did was I started working with a lot of different people. I was getting very popular off of Free Radio Revolution, especially covering Sandy Hook and then Boston and many other big events that were happening at the time. And a lot of people were really in a state of fear. The manipulation seemed so high, and it just seemed so helpless that we couldn't wake people up to it. So there was this strong sort of personal desire to try to get as many people involved and try to wake up as many people as possible. And so I started working and corresponding, working and supporting a lot of different channels. And then eventually those led to doing live shows. And two of the shows that I was known for in the early day were the Max Resistance Roundtable. That was the first show that I was on. I was one of the original people on it. And then, of course, We'll Do It Live, the Real Alternative Podcast, which is a show that I created and co-hosted along with Truth Media Revolution, who at the time was Red Pill Revolution. So having all that experience and working, and we had a show, and our sort of idea with the show We'll Do It Live was to just bring people on, people that put out not a lot of work, but we thought had potential. And, we wanted to get good folks an opportunity to get more views and to take part and feel like, get a following and help us disseminate this important information. But what happened over time was that there was a group think psychosis that inevitably happens in any sort of organization where you're with the same people all the time. And that is something that I saw firsthand, and I saw what it could lead to, especially when you got some of the more conspiracy-minded people in the truth movement, the ones that believe, Satanism and stuff like that, and all, whether, like you start combining all these groups together, and then, you have this group sort of think, and then you want to be respectful towards people, even though you might completely disagree with the information that they're presenting. So eventually we got to a point where everything was fake, or at least was what we were seeing was being pushed, was that everything was fake, and that you can't trust anything. So the wake-up call for me was really with the event called Transasia, where I call it the most provable plane crash in the history of humanity, with umpteen different camera angles and, physical evidence and, human evidence and just the logistics and everything. It was just mind-blowing. And yet that was one of the events that was used to really psy up a lot of people and split what we would have called a large portion of the YouTube truth sort of community. Mm-hmm. And it turned into it was a real sort of psychological warfare that was going on. And I was being attacked like crazy, like never before and never since, really. They were making anywhere from 5 to 20 videos a day on me. And then, just hitting me everywhere in the comments, and just a nonstop assault. And so I was portrayed as a bad guy because I stood up to what I believed was a psyop and was being provided by complete disinfo agents, people that have no accountability, that think that everything's fake, that are incapable of doing any serious research. They auto-hoax everything, and they don't care about how that affects people in any way. In fact, you would have to think that these people display elements of sociopathy in their callous sort of approach to disseminating this terrible disinfo. So that was a big wake-up call for me. And since I was so central, and I worked with so many people, so anybody, like most of the YouTube channels that you heard of in the truth movement, whether it's like the Vigilant Christian or the Scariest Movie or Dabu 7 or Professor Doom or, Press Reset. I mean, I worked with everyone pretty much that was big on the scene at that time. And now I see how foolish it was to take that approach. I understand my reasoning for, I understand what we were thinking at the time, but I also see now that it was conducive to terrible sort of groupthink and psychosis, echo chamber, of course, where you're in a chamber where everybody is repeating the exact same thing. Nobody's questioning what the information that's being presented, the validity of it, if it's factual. People automatically, as soon as an event would come out, would be putting up hoax videos within minutes of the event. It was like a race. And so what I started to suspect really quickly was that there was an operation that was being conducted. And now I'm very, very certain that that's still going. In fact, I think it's much worse now, because I think it's easy to hire people to come on to outlets like YouTube and just push absolute terrible disinfo and psyop people into these types of psychosis. You just throw away all logic and reality, and you hop on board the crazy train.
Before we dig further into that, can I take you back, because you mentioned quite a lot of different aspects that I wanted to dig into a bit further for the very reasons as you're describing. But I want to roll it back a bit and ask one of those, which I think is probably a bit of an obvious question, but what was the initial driving force that got you into actually putting stuff out via YouTube, putting content out there, speaking out, standing up and saying, no, I disagree, what the mainstream media is saying?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. I have the perfect answer for that, because that's the problem. Is my channel was taken down, Pre-Radio Revolution. That was my big channel and all that. So I had 1,200 videos, lots of podcasts and lots of different things. We, as friends, now two of my very good friends, Paul and Greg, that I used to do the show Free Radio Revolution with, we were always getting together and talking about this stuff, and talking about the New World Order, and talking about how nations were losing their sovereignty, and they were pushing towards a one globalized government, and most people were very oblivious to it. And then the spy state, and like we had at the time what we called WikiLeaks, where we had the one of the ministers in the conservative government come out and say that you must allow the government to have access to your computer. Otherwise, you are cited with the child pornographers. So, it was, you're either with us or against us, using the exact same language. And these were the things that were happening. We had the Norway shooting all around that time. So we were always getting together and yapping about this stuff. And so my friend Greg kept saying, we should do a podcast. We should do a podcast, because other people were doing them. So eventually, we had the podcast, and it was very, very, unprofessional, I guess you could say. Well, it wasn't so much unprofessional. It was just guys getting together, drinking beers, smoking doobs, and shooting the shit sort of thing. Much like what we see in a lot of shows. And we were just there giving our opinions on what was going on. So that was the whole genesis of where I came from. And then what happened was, eventually it just got difficult to keep hosting the shows, and some people couldn't make certain days, and then we'd miss a couple weeks. And then I got frustrated, because I was doing all the work. I was doing all the video production and all that. So I felt at a point, and I started making solo videos, that I would want to run solo. So that's what happened. I went solo with the show, and I'm still really good friends with the guys that I used to do the show with, but I just wanted to do my own thing, sort of thing. So that's how I got into it. And then right before we kind of stopped doing the end of the live shows, Sandy Hook had happened, and I started doing a lot of work on Sandy Hook, putting out a lot of videos, and that started getting me a lot of attention. And it also gave me confidence in the ability to host my own shows and all that. So that's where it came from, essentially.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was around the Sandy Hook period when I first subscribed to your channel, for that very reason, because I was looking for people who were covering the topic and going into it, analysing it, etc. So, yeah, that was, I think, where I first encountered your original channel, and I've been following your work ever since then, really. But that driving force to speak out, is that I know this might sound a bit of a kind of dig, and I don't mean it as a dig. This is just trying to be honest and objective about motivations.
Right.
Is that a kind of you feel a need to help people? You feel a need to get involved and get cat jumping on you. So, you know, to reach out and try and cut away that ignorance, that bullshit that's been thrown at everybody, to help those that have been subjected to having it thrown all over them. I'm asking in that sense of, you know, I'm asking about driving force. What is it that keeps you doing this? Because you've been subjected to so much harassment, you know,
Yeah.
but you keep coming back. You're persistent and consistent. And I think
Well,
that is something that people really need at the moment, as that kind of touchstone foundational grounding.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because look, there was a point where I'll be perfectly honest, where and I was, you know, pretty close to some of the big truth channels, Red, Silver, J, people like that, before, you know, Team Way come up and others. So there was a point where I was falling into the auto hoaxing and falling into just making my opinion more important than the event, or not. I don't know if that's the right way of saying it, but just believing my own sort of opinion was so experienced and so wise, and that I could just look at event and you know, determine its validity just through my experience and, you know, the success, and of course the echo chamber that I had around me and all that. And I started to realize the mistakes that were constantly being made, and you know, we did some really good work. I think we over, you know, some of the psyops that we exposed, and they did happen. There was hoaxes. Like, I believe Sandy Hook was a hoax event. But the problem is that then every single event that started to happen became a hoax. And you, as a content provider, there's an intoxication, because there's a popularity factor that comes with being first and being quicker and being
being right, being seen as being right, and people feeding that back to you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and screaming hoax harder and louder, and beating your chest, and, you know, sticking your you know, your pegs in the ground really deep, and standing your ground. And I realized that I was in these echo chambers, and that a lot of these people that were, you know, I can't really say, you know, like, I know some people that I worked with were not genuine, and we learned over time that, you know, certain people were very suspicious of whether or not they were, you know, government employees, or they were paid to go on to disseminate this type of info. But we saw that there was an auto hoaxing mentality that had risen up. And of course, I always mention TransAsia, because that, to me, is the best example of how insane people had gotten, to the point where nothing that happened, no matter how much, the more evidence you had, the more footage you had, the more proof that it was a hoax. You know, oh, it's really high, amazing CGI, or it's, you know, like, and then on the flip side, if you know, some people will take selective videos of NASA, distant shots of you know, spacecraft re-entering orbit, Earth's orbit and shit like that, and they'll say, look at how awful this footage is, you know, it's garbage, without giving you any context or anything. And then on the flip side, if the images are so awesome and, you know, it's so convincing, they'll say, well, it's obviously CGI, look how well done it is, sort of thing. So, and we saw people manipulating. They would go in and actually use CGI to manipulate evidence in order to present their hoax argument. So what I and others had discovered is that there was a infiltration into the truth movement, and that's one of the reasons why I've been so targeted, because I'm real. I'm not here to deceive you. I have lost in the last week close to 1,000 subs just because of my stance on some of the disinfo that's swirling about, as usual. And so I you know, I've given up a huge amount of my popularity in order just to be, you know, myself, and say what exactly what I feel about what's going on, not being in the echo chamber, extracting myself completely from it. And now all that I have left are the ties that I had built. And I don't like to burn bridges because I don't want to turn on people that were friendly and supportive and I think are probably nice people and probably decent people with, you know, the best intentions. But as we all know, the road to hell is paved with the best intentions. So we think, or I think, that there are a lot of big truth channels that are constantly throwing around all kinds of really, really, you know, bad information or just, you know, anything that will get them the type of attention that, you know, and a lot of these people are making a living off their work, or at least supplementing their income. So if you use that monetary factor, and if you're someone and you're making money off your channel, it's going to change your mindset because you're going to want to put out videos that are going to get the most views.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to get you the most views? Well, if you throw Illuminati and, you know, hoax and things like that, exclamation marks, crisis actors, things like that, that's going to get you a lot more views than if you just say, well, here's my sort of analysis of this such and such an event, you know? So there's, yep. Sorry.
I just wanted to, do you think in that respect that the commodification of this medium, I know, you know, this goes back a long way into the structure of the internet and the World Wide Web and advertising online, etc. But in particular reference to YouTube, when a few years ago it got taken over by Google, became GooTube, and there was yet more encouragement to monetize. And then they brought in this whole aspect of having subscription channels where you pay to view the content directly through them. So almost like a pay-per-view subscription system. That in and of itself, by attaching a monetary value to what we do here, is guaranteed to bring in the con men, the snake oil salesman, just because they can see an easy market. Because there's always there's a dupe born every second, you know. So to them, it's like putting a dab of poo that's attracting all the flies onto your diamond that you're trying to show to people. And it's inevitable that we've now got to this point where it's quite saturated with all this bullshit that is just about clickbait to get advertising revenue so that people can do this as a job.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And once, like, it's one thing. So say, you know, if you have a sports channel or you know, video game or entertainment or movies or whatever, that's your thing, right? Obviously, if you're doing that and you're making money off it, you're going to want to get as many views as possible. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. And it's just the nature of capitalism and people, you know, the modern sort of internet system of bringing in revenue. The problem is when you're talking about really important events and you take a certain approach because it's going to better your income. And that, of course, means that you're willfully you know, profiteering off of events and how you are calling them, and that's going to affect how you call the events as well, because you're going to say, you know what, if every event happens and I take the approach that we know that Sandy Hook happened, so you can put in your intro sort of thing on Sandy Hook. Of course, we remember Sandy Hook and Boston and all these things. You know, here they are again. So, you know, committing all these logical fallacies, because if one event is fake, that of course doesn't mean every other event is fake, and you're just giving into your confirmation bias. But if you take that approach and you're not taking an unbiased approach to it, and you're just saying, look, I'm going to look at this event and I'm going to look at all the different angles. I'm going to look at all the information that's available, and I'm going to try to do the best research I can. I'm going to try to give you what I feel is happening. That's not what these people are doing. These people are like, I know how I'm going to get ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. If I put this in the title and I suggest this, and they don't want to have accountability. They don't want to spend time researching, because that takes away from time for making more videos, which will bring in more income and bring in more subs and all that. So there is an inherent sort of serious problem to profiteering from doing what we would call truth work. Because inevitably, the more deceitful you are, the more likely you're going to get more money and more subs and a better income sort of thing. So
do you think that that is inevitable, or is it just a an effect of this medium where it's being offered now as this change of paradigm is happening, and most Western countries are being deindustrialized, and we've been turned into a service and a knowledge-based industry system. They want people to actually become YouTube content creators and do nothing but earn a living from doing such. So I'm just trying to look at it from, it's not necessarily inevitable, but it's such a temptation for most people. And when they are being socially engineered to have very little other choice, a lot of people fall into it through ignorance or just willfully because they see an opportunity to earn a living by doing this kind of stuff.
And I do think, you're right. It is kind of an inevitable outcome because, and then that's the problem though. I mean, for me, it's never been a problem because I've never made a cent. So if I've never made a cent off my videos, then why do I care if I'm getting 20 or 50? Well, I mean, I do in a way. I used to. It used to be really important to me because I was like, I want to have a popular channel. I want people to listen to me. I want that attention, right? We all do to a certain extent. Nobody puts up a video on YouTube thinking, I don't want anybody to watch this. Everybody puts up videos in hope that a lot of people will come in and see their work and give them accolades and support them. So I understand the motivation. But the problem is the whole, 5-letter word, TRUTH. I mean, if you're really being honest in your reporting, then you're not going to sensationalize things. You're not going to cater to a certain demographic because that will bring in a huge amount of views, and subs, and all that equates to making money. So that is a major problem because, as I said, I mean, if you're doing it with video games or you're doing it with television shows or movies or whatever, kittens, you're not taking actual stories and making people believe a certain sort of conspiracy is going on, which could be damaging to people. I mean, I think it can be very damaging to people to fall into that type of psychosis where they start thinking the sky is falling, everything's fake, the world leaders are all Satanists, and we're all going to be killed and all this stuff, I mean, CERN is opening portals that is altering our universe, and now we're living in a different sort of universe, and the earth is flat, of course, and we live in a dome. I mean, this is the insanity that people fall into, and that's called truth. And a lot of those channels that put out that type of information have the truth in their title, and they have nothing to do. They couldn't be further. In fact, they're as far away from the truth than anyone else in the world, because nobody else in the world is trying to go out there and convince people of insanity, right? I mean, these people that are making money off their video game channels, they're not trying to convince people that the world is flat, and that you live in a dome and you're living in an alternative universe. So there is a real sort of malevolence or almost an evilness that comes into it, because it's like some of these people are just foolish and they have terrible they have no scientific knowledge, and they just are they're just the type of people that fall for these things. But the ones that are very successful in doing it and that are actually making a living and doing this full time are, in my opinion, they're bad people, and they are willfully misleading people in order to profit, and of course the repercussions of that is that a lot of people are hurting themselves, because you can imagine if you're trying to live a normal life and you show up at a wedding or a soccer game or whatever, and you start a conversation and you start off, maybe you get into 9/11, you start talking about 9/11 truth and stuff like that. Next thing you know, you're talking about flat earth, and people are looking at you like you've got 3 eyes, and you stepped off a spaceship. So, this could hurt you in real life when you believe in bad disinformation. It could have, you could lose your job, you could lose your relationships, your family could turn on you, you could become, the village idiot. Gossip could swirl around. I mean, there are real consequences of these manipulations.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are falling into this. So
can I ask you, as you reference the word truth,
mm-hmm.
and expanding on that using the idea of appropriation, because in a similar manner to how they've commodified things to draw in those bad aspects to distract people or stifle them or quagmire them in their progression, to keep them in the corral. But in the same manner, they've been actively using methods of appropriation, cultural appropriation, as well as, I think, what I could call psychological appropriation, by things such as altering, or in a cultural Marxism fashion, diluting the definition of the word, such that when somebody says, I'm looking for truth, now in come all these other connotations from these crafted memes of things such as flat earth, or you believe the queen is a lizard, or think of the most fantastical things that you've seen out there on the internet. And I know you've referenced this many times in some of your videos, talking about that kind of Cass-Sunstein effect.
Yeah.
And we could dig into so many links to show people about this kind of stuff with GCHQ and the way they use game theory to manipulate people in this psychological manner. And they've used this as a wedge, once they've appropriated the word now, so that we find it difficult to talk about truth, because all this other crap gets thrown in along with it. That now is being used as a driving wedge to, in a Majestic 12 kind of fashion, an MK Ultra kind of fashion. They are fragmenting people's minds into these little delusional, dissonant, psychotic aspects of unreality, where they question their very existence to the point of, I can remember posting a comment on one of your old broadcasts when you're doing it live, and reality is a hoax and you are all shills. It's got to that stage now where I could quite easily put up a hypothesis that your eyes are an illusion, so everything you're seeing with your eyes is a hoax. You can't believe it.
If you think about it, I mean, the latest thing that's coming from what we would consider to be the disinfo, Cass-Sunstein infiltration type, is that, of course, these giant mountain buttes like the Devil's Tower and stuff are actually tree stumps. So they have dumbed down people to the point, and they have taken, as you said, they've appropriated the word truth, and flipped it so that it equals the opposite of what it is. And I'm at the point, I showed this maybe last week or so, I can't remember exactly when, but I did a video and I was talking about it. And I said, I'm like subscribed to like 2 or 3 channels that have the name truth in them, because I'm so turned off. Like the name itself, that's why we've been using the word twoof, of course, and twoofer all comes from the 9/11 sort of thing, and like 9/11, all the disinfo that was going about dealing with 9/11 truth, and people that were claiming UFOs and lizards and whatever, just no planes, all this stuff. Now they're it's being put on every single event that happens, so that the type of psychological infestation that went into the 9/11 truth movement has now implanted himself all over YouTube. And I only know YouTube, so I can't say Facebook or Twitter and all those. I can't talk about all the other avenues of getting information, but I think most of us, at least people that are listening, use YouTube to get a lot of this information. And I think that's what they have done, is that they're able to do this. Like they use these tactics of kind of a divide and conquer, to put it simply, but like they'll come in as agitators. They have usurped the term truth and they have flipped it upside down so that they can apply, they can throw anything as ridiculous as you could possibly imagine out there, and then splash the term truth all over it, and use the channels that have the name truth in them, putting up that these giant mountains were actually trees that were 10,000 feet tall and cut down by giants. Like anybody that is coming from outside this sort of community realm of what we call the truth movement would immediately hightail out of there. They'd be like, well, these people are absolutely insane. And I think that is exactly one of their methods is to just infest the truth movement with such idiocy that nobody takes us seriously. And that if you're at that dinner or that wedding or that soccer game, you're having that conversation, and if you have invested yourself into this disinfo, eventually you'll be talking to people about flat earth. You'll be talking to people about there are no forests and stuff like that, because you have fallen so far into psychosis that you actually now have no connection to reality. And that is the devious game that's being played. And I've never, I mean, like, it's gotten worse. You made the point before about Google taking over. They appropriated frickin' YouTube, which should have been, and ideally should just be a nonprofit sort of organization for everyone. That would be, because it's a complete monopoly in every sense of the definition. It is a monopoly. I mean, people, they talk about putting up videos, it's YouTube. People that talk about watching, they go to YouTube. YouTube has a complete control of the entire sort of personal video market. I don't know what the numbers are, but I would imagine it's 95% of video content that is consumed is off of YouTube. So that is a real problem. And then you have one of the most powerful sort of Orwellian type of information corporations out there, which is Google, with incredible amounts of power. And they have created this system on YouTube, which is astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing. It's like, instead of like, okay, we're going to protect people on YouTube and make sure that people aren't using all kinds of, fake accounts and nobody's allowed to astroturf things and all that. They've done the opposite. They've said, okay, we're going to allow people to have as many accounts as possible. We'll allow them to impersonate anybody that they want. We'll put these really awful sort of copyright system, which now they've thankfully have altered over the last couple of months. But prior to this, I mean, you get a strike on your channel. Anybody can throw a strike at you. So I would have these shill operations, and they would boast about it. They would say, yeah, we took down his video, or yeah, we did this and that. So like they have made the ultimate platform for disseminating disinfo, Google, with YouTube right now. And that is why the truth movement is really the lie movement now. It's the opposite of what it should be. And I'm trying to set the proper example by exposing how disinfo is running rampant and how people are not doing proper research. I know I've been there, so I'm able to say, look, I was once making a lot of these mistakes, and I realized that I was making these mistakes, and that's why I changed, because I want to be a better person. And I want to look back 10, 15 years from now and say, you know what, I was doing something good. It was important. I wasn't misleading people. I wasn't filling people up with bullshit. I wasn't trying to make money off of disinfo. I wasn't doing all this stuff. So, but we're in a battle here, a psychological warfare. And unfortunately, we have one of the worst corporations, which is Google, that has taken one of the biggest social media platforms and turned it into the ultimate sort of shill, troll, disinfo type of
a psychological battlefield.
Exactly.
It is at the moment. It's become really the I don't want to say vanguard. It's not exactly the vanguard, because you've got a lot of other deeper stuff going on the internet in that respect. But in terms of the first step beyond the mainstream media for most people in Western societies, because they're used to that television style media environment, and it's been slowly transitioned to now being the internet and this kind of video on demand and conferencing kind of system. Yeah, definitely. I think of it as well as the kind of generation psyop. I know yourself and others, ourselves, I say ourselves like the royal we. Myself, I do it a lot, but referencing a lot of the classic kind of sci-fi and dystopia cultural references, whether it be in literature form or movie form, films and stuff like that, because I really do think that a lot of these manipulations are not coming in what would seem to most people a direct approach. They won't make it obvious like that. It won't be a truck full of brown-shirted, jackbooted stormtroopers turning up outside your door to come and demand that you sign the political correctness dictionary, and that they inspect your house to make sure you've got no contraband of free-thinking material or anything like that. It's going to be much more subtle. I much prefer that kind of George Carlin description of the smiley-faced fascism. And this is being presented in these, I know you've sort of talked about this in that kind of cultural manipulation aspect of the big popular channels that you get on YouTube, and how they are being used to nudge people one direction or another. So it's very much a psychological battlefield, but for most of the general public, they're still sort of near the outer edge. So to them, it's sort of, it's a bit chaotic, it's a bit confusing, but they're not seeing it for what it is. They see it as just being the odd crazy person online talking about strange stuff. They haven't quite yet got to the point of, well, hang on a minute, you're telling me my own government will actually use propaganda against me? And then another step is there are actually people out there who are attempting to psychologically manipulate me for those very same ends. What? And it's only then, I think, when you start to see that there is actually a psychological warfare going on here, and you're part of it once you start reaching into these kind of topics and being willing to stand up and attempt to share this kind of information with people.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we tend to think of only the truth movement sort of thing and focus in our own backyard. But you're right. I mean, people are being programmed by their media, whether they know it or not. They turn to their favorite channels, whether it's like BuzzFeed or PewDiePie or whatever, and they are being conditioned into a new world order, whether they know it or not. And even the people that are disseminating or putting up these videos are willingly taking part. Well, maybe not even willingly, but are just making obscene profits from putting out exactly what they want you to put out, sort of thing. But getting back to the actual truth movement, it's just like the amount of psychological warfare that is going on now it's out of this world. It really is. I just see like more and more. So the way I see it is like before, like one of the biggest mistakes that I made, and it wasn't just me, obviously, but I had a big part in it, was trying to make a community and trying to get people to get along and all this. And it turned out to be a terrible thing. I would caution people strongly against forming communities online, especially, I mean, it's one thing if you're into sports or video games or whatever, that's not going to be a problem. But when it comes to truth and all that, that is a very dangerous place, because you don't know who's who. You really don't. And I get channels that will support me and give me gushing praise, and then like that, they flip at a certain point in time. And that's part of the psychology that they try to use against truthers, is they try to set up a whole bunch of people that you'll trust if you're a popular YouTube content maker sort of thing, and then have those people flip on you at a certain point of time to mess with you psychologically. And that has happened so many times with me. So that's one of the things that I've seen. And I imagine that, it's hard to know about the numbers of how many people are being employed by these governments to come into to truth movements and to either shill, troll, or just disseminate absolute bullshit or create all kinds of division. But I would estimate that it's growing, and I think it's cheap for them to do this. I don't think it's very expensive at all. Most people have their own computers. I think they can find people online that have a history of doing that for free, and try to contact them, in a clandestine sort of way, and say, we see what you're doing. How would you like to do this for a living? And then next thing you know, it's just, this is what we want you to focus on. These are the people we want you to do. And you get an update a couple times a week, sort of thing, and they monitor your progress or whatever. I really can't speculate. I can speculate, but I really don't know exactly what the formats or how they are recruiting these people to do this type of work. But I know it's happening. And that is why I say to people, and I'm doing this with myself, where I'm constantly moving away from working with lots of people, and now I'm working with hardly anyone, like a very small group of people that I have proven to themselves, to me over, years of working with them to be, good people. And that's how I judge people, by the fruits of their, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but I would say to people, like, if I were to do it again, I would never have gotten involved in hosting all these shows. I mean, I would have just done my own shows. And the problem is I think a lot of people are lonely. I think that there is a need to feel accepted, and there is that social, communal sort of desire, and so the truth movement can fill in for if that is lacking in your life, and that's a mistake. Sorry, go ahead.
Because I just wanted to put a sort of a different perspective on it. I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly, but I see it from a slightly different angle. I think the truth movement as a concept, that's another part of the appropriation that stemmed off the back of the 9/11 truth movement. Because really, to my knowledge, other than things like talking about the Illuminati and stuff like that, who claim they know the truth and whatever religion that always claims, we've got the truth. But in that aspect, the only thing, certainly in recent times, that's been a definitive thing labeled as a truth movement was the 9/11 truth movement. They were actually an organized group that would turn up at protests and try to disseminate information to the public, stuff like that. But in terms of the kind of aspects I think that I'm approaching it from, certainly, is that there is no truth movement. There's no such thing as a group that you can join. You're missing the point if you think it has a leadership or a membership or anything like that. That is something that the system wants you to do, because then they can have you on a list and they can compartmentalize you, figure out who your leaders are, deal with them, and then your movement falls apart. Exactly. And in that respect, the reason I wanted to sort of describe it from that perspective is because another aspect of a lot of what I've seen happening, and I think you've experienced this yourself in what you've just been describing, your experience of trying to do things in this YouTube environment, is those agents out there have been busy cul-de-sacking little groupings of either an individual or a small grouping into little areas where they can then snip the connections between them. And these little groups have ended up fracturing off into almost cult-like environments where you get that classic echo chamber feedback loop effect, and they're nicely pocketed in small groups that present less potential danger or risk to the established status quo. You're not likely to get together enough popular support or participation to pose a risk to the biggest mafia on the planet, as far as they're concerned. So this was one of the main reasons why I wanted to touch base with you and get back in contact with you. Not in the sense of forming a community kind of thing, but in the sense of demonstrating that, look, you can see how here your experience has pushed you more and more into ending up feeling like the only way you can approach this is to work on your own, because it is difficult. It is really difficult to have confidence in discerning the people out there that are trustworthy and are coming into this for the right reasons. There's so much deception, there's so much psychological warfare going on, but they are trying to split us into smaller and smaller compartments.
You've completely hit the nail on the head there with that. There's no doubt about it. I've witnessed this over and over again. I've tried to alert people to it. I probably didn't put it quite as well as you, as succinctly as you put it right there. But yes, they are compartmentalizing people. They are trying to break up groups. They are trying to, like, if they see that there's a certain level of strength, like what we saw when we were doing the Max Resistance Roundtable, and then we'll do it live, there was like this explosion centered around those two shows, where all of a sudden you had all these shows that sprung out. There was even like a show that was called We'll Do It High, in which fans of the show We'll Do It Live would get together and smoke joints and get wasted. So like we saw an explosion of this sort of community. And since I was one of the ones in the center of it, I was one of the targets. A lot of these disinfo agents came in directly from our show. There's one in the chat there, Terrible Tim, who was a first-time caller who came into one of our shows, much like John LeBon, who I'm. If anybody was to say, can you point a specific shill that you are certain is a shill, I would say John LeBon without even hesitation. And I would say Terrible Tim as well. They are people that were, I imagine they were hired to come in and get into our circles and, gain our confidence. So these people would call up the shows and say, wow, I'm such a big fan. I'm starting my own show. I'm in Australia, or I'm in Switzerland or France or whatever. And, you guys are the best. I'd love to come on the shows. And the next thing you know, they're on the show. Next thing you know, we're promoting them. Next thing you know, we're on their shows. Next thing you know, they're creating all kinds of division and infighting. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we saw. Now, ultimately, it's a good thing, because ultimately there were terrible things that we were making all kinds of mistakes, and you can't, in the truth movement, you can't make those type of mistakes. You can't be in an echo chamber. That doesn't help anything. All you hear, anything you say, well, that looks fake. Well, that's 33 Masonic or whatever. One eye, all of a sudden, everyone that's around you is in complete agreement, and so you start to look at things, and people start to pick out every little detail, and all of a sudden, yeah, it's totally hoax and totally this, totally that, Masonic, satanic, whatever. So you can't allow yourself to fall into that, because then you're not properly discerning the information that's coming in. You are being influenced by those people around you. So you got to pull yourself out of the echo chamber. That's what, an extension of group think, where you're in a group and you have a certain mindset. And so every time an event happens, you're approaching it from, say, what we would call, probably pretty accurately, I know a guy called BZ calls it a hoax brain. And that's what we see happening on YouTube now, where this hoax brain mentality takes over. Every time a major event happens, the hoax brain jumps in, and anything that's odd, anybody that looks nervous as somebody who's being interviewed, or anybody who's on CNN is automatically crisis actor. So like all these things were mistakes, and you've got to stop. So you pull yourself out of that. And, yes, the disinfo agents were put in to cause all this chaos, divide people, compartmentalize them, get them in smaller groups, have them fighting against each other. It's exactly what's been going on. There's no doubt about it. And you have to pull yourself out of that. So I feel like now I'm in a good place doing the type of work that I'm doing, even though my popularity is plummeting in many ways. But it means I'm doing things right, because I'm at least saying, look, there's major problems. Our methods, or the methods that are being used, are not methods that are going to work. They're methods that are doomed for failure. You have to take each event separately. You have to, use a sort of real strong sort of discernment when you're getting this information coming in, not succumb to groupthink, not succumb to auto hoaxing, and just try to do the best that you can to, present the information that you feel people need to see, sort of thing, with these events. So I find that, I'll probably, I do have good friends. So some of the people I work with have the same mentality that I do, where they have matured and they are intelligent. Like when last time I started seeing the hoax angle again was with the Pulse, and I had one of the people that I work with come and reach me on Skype immediately saying, are you sure? Because if you start running with this, there's going to be a ripple effect, and that person helped me, keep me in check. And that's what I look for people that I work with. I look for people that, are going to, play devil's advocate, that are going to stand up and cross-examine whatever I put forth and say, well, you know what, maybe you're wrong on that thing. I think you better double check that. That's the type of environment of investigation that you want to be in. You do not want to be in the echo chamber of idiocy where, everything is decided as soon as it happens, and then you're just trying to put together whatever oddity you can gather up to support that line of thought, which of course it's all fake. So yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Being able to disagree without ending up in conflict with each other, such that you have an improved discernment, because you learn it. Your discernment skills, your discernment muscle is learning through that process of somebody turning around and saying to you, hang on a minute, have you seen this evidence? You know, I don't think you got that right because you've missed out this bit of the evidence that we can reference. And that, for me, in this environment, certainly over the last year in particular, but it sort of started in 2012 when they announced the big Brigade 77 and all that shit. This has been transformed into a gladiatorial bread and circuses environment where if you don't agree with what's presented, you're automatically therefore against it. So you're in the enemy camp, and there is no discussion or discourse or even agreement to disagree. There is just, because you are the other, I must attack you. And you know, that gets into deeper psychological aspects, which, you know, reference things like Tavistock and how just from the British point of view, the British Empire has been very, very good at these kind of psychological manipulations over the last few hundred years. You know, they've perfected a lot of them. So it's one thing to have people you can feel you can trust, so that when they say something like that to you, you can go, oh, okay, yeah, thanks for not letting me, you know, jump out the gate before I'd got me saddle sorted. Do you think that at what point does it go from echo chamber to acceptance that the other person you're talking with or interacting with is genuinely agreeing with you? They're not just saying it to butter you up or blow smoke up your ass. You know, they were a good thinking, sentient being unto themselves, and they actually happen to agree with you.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's why I work with so few people, because the people that I eventually, you know, trial and error, you work with so many different people, and then you start to say, you whittle down the group, and you say, it's like having friends, you know, in real life. You say, these people are a good influence because they keep me in check, they keep me grounded, they don't let me get too high on myself, they correct me when I make mistakes, they remind me of, you know, my responsibility, all those things, and those are good people. Good in real life. It's the same thing. So, I mean, it is real life in a sense, right? But you know what I'm saying? Like your real physical sort of relationships that you have in real life. I mean, if you're hanging around with people that are drug dealers and criminals, and you know, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna get yourself in hot water. It's gonna be a bad decision. And it's the same on YouTube. If you're hanging around with people that are all flat earth and, you know, just idiocy and throwing out all this garbage, what's the point? I mean, you're not part of any truth. I mean, you might consider yourself or claim that you're a truth movement, but you're not, because you're hanging out with people that are willfully putting out terrible disinfo. And whether that's because they are really just agents that are employed to do this, or whether they're just bad people or people with limited intelligence that should not have an audience. I mean, I think YouTube allows the village idiot to actually have an audience. So I think that there is that appeal that you can be a village idiot and have success on YouTube, because if you just scream the loudest and you know, make fun the most and stuff like that, people will listen to you. Because there's a lot of village idiots out there. But that's the thing. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
What about the aspect of that culture creation again, and the well-known now, I think, and more than provable in one way or another, manipulation of digital information to do with things like viewer count and subscriber numbers and likes on a page and things like that. The reason I'm suggesting that and talking about culture creation is things such as Jackass, and that kind of idolization of the inane, of the stupid, you know, the world of the stupid, and even the stupid can be a celebrity. And in a sort of Hunger Games kind of way, you know, they're pushing that idea such that the millennial generation now is being, I think, very well indoctrinated into this concept that, you know, it doesn't matter what you do, you can just sit and fart and you'll become a YouTube sensation, and you can do that for the rest of your life, and everybody will love you and adore you, and all that kind of celebrity fame, egoic, narcissistic feedback crap.
Yes.
But the reason I mention it in that sense is, even though I can see the same things you're referencing of like channels such as PewDiePie that's got a ridiculous number of views and subscribers and whatever, but I question the genuineness of that, even to the point of there may not necessarily be all fake numbers, but people are being herded towards that kind of content.
Absolutely.
So more stimulating or creative or intellectually intelligent content is being shuffled to the back shelf, if not completely sidelined.
Well,
whereas the crap is being presented to people as the latest, greatest fashion that they must consume.
Exactly. Now, people that are watching, you can see that I have the avatar for my other gaming channel or entertainment. It's not really a gaming channel. It's just an all jack. It's the lighter stuff that I do, but I still do a lot of critical analysis of popular YouTube channels, and so I've been covering a lot of the big gaming channels, and seeing their content for the first time over the last 6 months or so since I started up doing Supreme Lord Commander, seeing a different element of YouTube other than just the truth movement and all the corporate media. And of course, it's happening. I mean, in the truth movement, you have a massive astroturfing and fake accounts. So you have, they'll promote channels that are putting out disinfo. So if you put a bad disinfo, the agents will show up and there are multiple accounts. They'll thumb up the video, make it look like, hundreds and hundreds of people are following, supporting it. And so there is that astroturfing that we've witnessed over and over again. It's like when I put up a video, like most of the videos I put up lately, I've had to monitor the comments, which I never used to do in the past, even though I should have, because I get so many that are just nasty. But I have to disable the ratings because the astroturfing hits my videos, and the same people that have consistently, this account has no, has no content, right? Ask the questions, why have you disabled the ratings? You don't want people to see what people actually think. Well, no, I don't want you and your 50 accounts to be able to persuade people that, people are hating the video. So that is just dealing with the truth. And then if you go into the big channels on YouTube, now, if you like, when I'm in my gaming channel, there's an option that you can switch to a gaming mode. When you're in the gaming mode and you go to your homepage, you get the feed of all the big channels, like the PewDiePies, the Quebblecraps, the Jacksepticeye's, and Markiplier's, all the big channels that are there. Now, those channels that are all super popular, I can say from my own sort of investigation into their work and watching a number of their videos, it's just happenstance that they became as popular as they are. The right place, right time. Somebody liked the idea of what their content was about. Now, I can't say how much it is like you have to put this out or do that. I don't know to the extent that they are being manipulated, but I know that everyone is being funneled into these channels, and that cannot be for no reason. Now, YouTube wants people to stay in their bubbles. So, like, it's funny when you look at YouTube and you go to the where the options of what kind of content you want to see. News, I think, is at the bottom. It's gaming and entertainment and music and all that. There's nothing wrong inherently with wanting to be entertained. And many people are so busy, they come home from work or school or whatever, and they want to go and they just want to let their brain relax. I understand that. But there is no doubt about it that people are being socially engineered into consuming the content that YouTube is providing, or the big YouTube content creators are providing. Now, one of the things that I did was a huge investigation into the LGBT whole movement, and I started off with YouTube because last year I started covering it right when Caitlyn Jenner first came out, and then I started looking last year because all these big YouTube channels were coming out saying I'm gay, or I'm transgender or whatever, you had all these massive channels. Ingrid Nilsson, Shane Dawson, just a whole slew of them that all came out within roughly a 2-month period, one after another, day after day, millions, 2 million, 5 million, 8 million subs coming out saying I'm gay or I'm bisexual or whatever. I was like, what the hell's going on? These are all the biggest channels. Then I started to look at who they work for, and they work for what we call multi-channel networks. So you have multi-channel networks like Machina and Maker, and so there's these big Frame is another one. There's these big multi-channel networks that control YouTube essentially. So those multi-channel networks, some of them are owned by Disney or Time Warner, or like the big entertainment, the big industry media corporations, and those multi-channel networks control YouTube. Like they get the views, they get everyone funneled into their channels. When the suggestions pop up on the side for the channels that you should subscribe, it's always the same ones. So there's no doubt that there is YouTube is anything but generic, or anything but sort of grassroots. It's completely opposite. It's a funneling, like where people are being driven into consuming certain types of culture. And then if you examine, which I've done with Supreme Lord Commander, the content that's coming off these channels. So I did a whole investigation into PewDiePie, and I did several videos. This guy, I couldn't believe it, because I just thought he was just some guy that goofed around making video games, but he's actually constantly doing homoeroticism and transgenderism, and like I was like shocked when I saw like he was constantly putting things up his ass. And there's one video where he's on a bed with three other of the most popular YouTube channels, and he pulled down his pants and was actually sticking a shock up his anus, and they were all saying, do it, do it, do it. And then they're saying that how they're going to have sex afterwards and stuff like that. And so they're normalizing this type of behavior, and this is what young children, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, this is what they're consuming. So they think that type of behavior is not only acceptable, but it's desirable, and that if you adopt that type of behavior, you're going to get huge amounts of success, and you could become so like you said, but the jackass sort of mentality is what's being pushed on the youth. And of course that, you could go into huge sort of depth about how that affects you, how that's going to affect your life if you're going to act like a jackass, how that has a social impact, because you have a huge percentage of the population that are basically have removed themselves from thinking about what's going on and have decided that they're just going to play jackass for the rest of their life, sort of thing, right? So yeah, I think you're right on the money. That this whole YouTube thing is socially engineered and constructed in a matter to keep people in these webs of, either idiocy or stupidity or jackassery or whatever. And that's one of the really negative things that I've seen since I started doing Supreme Lord Commander.
Yeah, it's where I think the sort of descriptive way you describe these people come here for these kind of nefarious reasons, and this as well sort of links in for me some of the stuff I've tried to sort of put out there or present it in different ways, say it in different ways, using different analogies and metaphor and whatever else. But there is that naive factor where in many ways the hoax meme idea was to ease people's concern that they need to actually get off the computer and go out there and figure out what's going on, because any minute now some kind of major disaster event could happen in their town, in their local nightclub, on their streets. So they give them this sopifying, this soma narrative that, oh, well, you don't have to worry about it because it's all a hoax. It's not real. Nobody actually died. Your government had never hurt you, even though your government actively, and using the UK here, using Great Britain as a reference point, our government actually signed into legislation acts and measures under the descriptive name of austerity that have provably led to the deaths of over 10,000 people at the last admitted number. That's killing people by removing their support. What's going on here, folks? This is our government actively doing things that end up to the demise of people in your society, including sending them off into fake wars, bullshit wars that are just about making money or some other reasoning or justification. And yet you want me to think that they wouldn't kill somebody by rolling a truck over them.
Yes.
How do you get to that place? That is such immense dissonance. I'm more concerned that you're stuck in that dissonance. How is this medium been able to reach into your head to such a degree that it can do that to you.
It's astonishing, because you think about that and you think, like, I say this a lot in my videos. I say, like, these are the same people that are trying to tell you that, you know, Satanists run the world and they're going to depopulate the entire planet, and they're, you know, they're chemtrailing us and they're doing all this stuff, and yet they never kill anybody. I mean, it's absolute folly. Also, when you think about it, it takes away the power of these events. And if they are indeed false flags, and people have really died, you know, and you're coming in and you're making fun of it and you're calling it a hoax and you're presenting terrible disinfo or not providing any sort of real you're going with your hoax mentality, you know, you are denying reality again. Mm-hmm. And in a dangerous way, because you're taking away the power of the event. Now, if the government's involved in orchestrating the event, that is of vital importance for people to know. There's no doubt about that. But to come in and to make this sort of mentality that nobody ever dies, nobody ever gets hurt, and then to make that the story, like that's another thing to think about, is that all these people that are caught in that sort of mindset, they're so concerned about people knowing that it's a hoax, or, you know, anybody that's saying that it's not a hoax, or you know, that's their whole function. Instead of looking at the legislation that's being passed, instead of looking at, you know, the anti-terror bills and, you know, all the restrictions, and, you know, as you said before, I mean, the things that the governments are doing, taking away people's support systems that are ultimately leading to the deaths of tens of thousands. Nobody's paying attention to that. Everyone's like, oh, it's a hoax, it's a hoax. I got to go around and tell everyone it's a hoax, and I got to attack anybody who disagrees. And it's just a big circus of idiocy. It's a complete distraction. Yes, if hypothetically an event happens and it is a hoax, I agree that it is important information and that should be thoroughly examined and presented, and you know, people should you know, definitely consider that as a possibility. But what we've seen now is this suspension in belief, where, you know, nothing ever happens, that the big bad Satanists that run our New World Order are all powerful and they control everything, and yet they never hurt anyone. You know,
it's that Gangela effect.
Yeah,
they're evil Satanists that are really lizard demons from another plane, and they like to eat babies for breakfast, but they never kill anyone. They only ever pretend to. They use CGI to do it, and so at that point,
you'd have to think at the same time that that's exactly what they would want you to think if you were becoming conspiracy minded, because then it softens what they are. It's like saying, well, these people never really hurt anybody. You know, people aren't really dying in these bombs, right?
I often use the term awakening, you know, because I'm more inclined towards talking about spiritual aspect of things and being able to see through this bullshit to find the truth on that path, that progress that we all go along. But in that respect of when they're coming into this environment, for most people, and I've read about this and heard this from other people in the past, and over the years I've agreed with it more and more, that yeah, for the majority of people, this is the kind of process you go through. It's almost like a grieving process, like the psychological academic description of it, you know, your depression, anger, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You know, I might be misremembering that, the dubbed bereavement process. But along that process, you go through a political awakening first, where you start to initially, like a lot of people do, you protest your government. You go and ask Master to fix the evil that Master is performing upon you. You know, so just please stop whipping me, Master. Give me more food, Master. Or stop the wars. You know, whatever it is people are protesting about, you appeal to what you still perceive as being the authority figure. But as you work your way through that geopolitical awakening becomes more of a spiritual awakening, where you start to question a lot more of the bigger picture of what's going on your planet and who's perpetrating it. But the reason I mention all that is that process of that alienation of the other because they can't deal with it. They're still in the denial phase. And as they're looking for the alternative information and they start turning away from the mainstream, it's almost like they're starting to walk towards the exit of the circus, or the amphitheater of the gladiatorial games, delusional distraction. But just before they exit the gift shop, somebody comes along and goes, "Oh, don't worry about looking at that information. It's all a hoax. It's all make-believe. It's all so fantastical that you shouldn't be believing it." And they get turned back around again, like in a turnstile, back into the matrix. Another aspect is things like a lot of the judicial system approaches, such as the free man movement and the Occupy movement, and various multi-spectral ways that the system has presented these turnstile traps for people. And I think that the hoax meme is another example of it, but it's much more relevant to this internet environment where what people think is the reality of what's going on in the world is what they're presented with on the screen. So as long as the presenter is careful to frame it and give them the illusion that they're telling them reality, they can say whatever the hell they like. They can say the moon's made of cheese.
Yes. It's like they're essentially trading, one false reality for another one, or you think that you're waking up because you're like, well, it's all, after all, it's all fake, right? And so now I know that I can't let this stuff affect me, but yet you become consumed with the idea of it all being fake, and then you become consumed with the idea of trying to enlighten everyone, and you're caught in that same turnstile where you're just constantly going, you're never getting rid of the problem. You're never getting to the root of the problem. You're just, and like you mentioned, all these groups that they create, and a lot of them have nefarious sources. Like we were getting into the whole Black Lives Matter and where it comes from and who's funding it and all this. And yeah, it's just another way. It's this cultural Marxism that they use to constantly divide people and pit them up against each other. And that's what I see all over. I even suspect that like I look at the feminist whole thing, and that's created a huge meme within the YouTube. But that's just another layer that people get. It's another turnstile, as you say, that people get caught up in, sort of thing. And I agree with that. It's like we're seldom ever looking for real solutions to the problems that we're consistently dealing with, because we never solve the problem to begin with, which is big government, essentially. Well, however you want to slice it up, it's governments that are here to take more control, governments that are becoming corporatized, that are becoming multinational, that are bonding together to create this one world government, and we're, by hook or by crook, we're going along with it. And we spend all this time debating endlessly over these events that happen without getting to the actual root of the problem. And I think you're really right about that. I think that's and that's perfect for them. I mean, that's exactly what they want. They want you to spend all your time caught up in the turnstile, never waking up to what needs to be woken up to, and never addressing the bigger problems, the bigger picture of what we're all dealing with.
Creating a Hegelian argumentation, such that you're going to be on one side or the other, and whichever side you pick, it doesn't matter, because they're still both leading you the same direction, and you just expend all your energy, all your attention in that argumentation of whether it was or was not whatever, a hoax, a false flag, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think you go back. I mean, I would suspect, you mentioned the Tavistock Institute. I would suspect that the Tavistock Institute was largely involved with the whole peace movement that happened in the 60s.
Yeah.
I look at that as being just, like people thought that they were, liberating themselves. Of course, it all came crashing down, but they thought there was this idea that they were creating a new type of I don't know, reality or something, like that they were going to, their peace love mantra was going to take over humanity, and there was a naivete to it that was astonishing, and people still look back at that and cherish it and think that that was some sort of triumph, but really it was just another layer of control that
I've argued for a number of years that it's, I mean, I've often referenced that situation around the 60s and the hippie movement and stuff like that. But I would also add into the conversation the more extra context, or the context that should be there in the first place, because the whole concept of the hippie movement and what happened during the 60s has been yet again co-opted and commodified. And that was another example of something such as the Occupy movement or
Yes.
Black Lives Matter at the moment. There was, and the reason I say it this way, I've argued this for a while now, a few years, and I don't think I'm the first person to say this, but I would suggest that each generation, which is approximately 30 years, between 20 to 30 years, from birth to adulthood, and I would say adulthood really is in your 30s, despite what most teenagers would say. But each generation, there is an upswell of energy for exactly that kind of thing. People who want to look for an alternative way of being and to hopefully, in one way or another, overgrow this current destructive paradigm that we've been living under for a few thousand years now, this kind of hierarchical system. But each time, and certainly I looked back to the point of like the Renaissance, but there's also other, so you can see other upswellings of it pre-Renaissance, early medieval period and earlier. But the point I'm making is that because you can reference the 60s, then you can reference the 20s, 30s, then you can reference the 1890s and things such as the rise of spiritualism and Blavatsky and all these kind of aspects. There is that upsurge of energy in every generation. And what has made this, sorry mate, just to finish.
Go ahead.
What has made this system become so entrenched and so far down the line to the worst it could possibly be from our point of view, because it's winding to a point of machine efficiency. But what it's been successful at doing is identifying when that upsurge happens and commodifying it and steam valving it in such a way that it never actually destabilizes the status quo. So instead we get these fake revolutions, such as the Chinese, the Russian, the French, the American, even the English, what's called a civil war. Really, it was a revolution. In the same fashion, that was compartmentalized, commodified, used for a certain purpose to create a rebirthing of the very same system that was there before. If anything, it actually codifies the system even more so and gives it more powers. So I know I do agree with you exactly on what you're saying about that kind of romanticized idea of the 60s and people living in communes and all that kind of stuff. But when you scratch into that, when you dig into that and you look for, well, what was the root of this uprising, you find people saying exactly the same kind of stuff that we've just been talking about now. And the same again as you leapfrog back that generational gap in history, and you find people the kind of stuff we're talking about is only different really by the technology that we're using. The principles of the stuff we're sharing with each other is the same again and again and again.
I agree. I can give a few examples because you're going back into history. World War I, it's quite well known that people in France and England and other parts of Europe cheered when war was declared, because it had been so long since Europe had been in a serious, prolonged war, and there was this romanticized sort of vision of war. There was this old guard that had been passed down, generational sort of thing, where people were told that if you're going to be a real man, you have to go off and fight and all that. So that's just one example. Another example, here in Montreal, we had a massive student protest that happened in 2012. It was international news. So you had students that were wearing a red square, the symbolism, of course, being obvious. They were wearing a red square, and they were protesting for months, taking up huge portions of the city. Now, we're not just talking about a few thousand. We're talking hundreds of thousands of students, almost on a nightly basis, taking over the city, banging pots and pans, having these endless sort of marches. And because all of it was because the government was going to increase the education cost for university students. And in Quebec, it's the cheapest in all of excluding Mexico. I don't know what Mexico is, but in all of North America, our university fees are the lowest. So all this energy, what they look at is like, well, we've got all this youth. Now, youth always has tons of energy. That's why you get rock and roll music and stuff like that from youth, right? Hip hop and contemporary type music. So you have to funnel that. You have to take that somehow and control it. And, by creating these movements, if you call them false movements or controlled movements, are the perfect way to keep people, like they feel like they're taking part in something, and they feel like they're having, like they're like having that sort of, hippie revolution in their own sort of area, town or city or whatever. And so they feel, and they put that youthful energy into, protesting whatever it is that they're protesting, of course, and not realizing that, you're in this system that, you're going to be in debt probably for the rest of your life. And, the whole system itself is designed on keeping you as ignorant as possible and keeping you in these false paradigms. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of it. I mean, I think it's cyclical because it has to be. It's a way of taking control of that youthful energy. And that's why most of these protests traditionally do come from the youth, because that's when you're like in between the years of like, say, 19 or 18 and say 30, you're in that prime of your life sort of thing where you have that physical energy to expend. And so that's when they want to get you into these movements in order to just keep you contained so that you don't wake up to the bigger, psyop that's going on, that this, one world sort of government that is taking control, hijacking humanity for its own good sort of thing. So I found that was like the student protest here, just being in the city and seeing this every day and seeing how students were all so concerned about the amount of money that they were going to have to spend. Now, that's important. I agree. It's, it's something. You want to have access to education, but it was really just a matter of dollars and cents. It wasn't a groundbreaking issue. And yet here they were marching down the streets every night, closing down the city, and they were all wearing a red square, right? And it was just, they couldn't see the irony of what they were doing, and how they had just been completely co-opted into their own servitude, sort of thing.
it's a good point to throw in there, that dogmatic aspect of the academic world and the intelligentsia. I use that word because if you look at some of the revolutions, you can see how the same demographic was used to push this idea to the point of a critical mass, such that the spark actually ignites and it becomes the revolution that they wanted. And the reason I say as well intelligentsia, because I think it encapsulates the concept that these people are told they're intelligent. Yeah, they're constantly encouraged that, you are the thinkers of our society. You're the ones that are going to write the policies and come up with all these culture ideas, creating culture and stuff like that. But really, they're coming from a cloistered and coddled and indoctrinated, dogmatic environment where if you question the current dogma, you're seen as a heretic who gets character assassinated and ostracized, and your work never gets published, and all these other kind of things about the academic world. And even though for myself, I come from this point of view, even though I appreciate the rationality of the scientific method, and I use it whenever it's appropriate, whenever I feel that, this is the tool to use to look at this information or analyze this event or whatever. When it becomes the academic world, it succumbs to that manipulation of the current political status quo. So it doesn't matter what country you're in, near enough, every single country is exactly the same. They're all part of the big game, you know, playing this pseudo competition with each other over the world's resources. But those people, the intelligentsia, classically define that demographic that is exactly as you described, that the age when you have your most physical, energetic self. You've not maybe mentally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually matured yet, which is why, as I mentioned earlier about I feel you don't really become an adult until you start reaching your 30s. And the more older traditions and cultural approaches to this were similar. You were considered a member of the tribe once you get through puberty. But a member of the tribe doesn't necessarily have the authority to be involved in things that affect the tribe as a whole. So they're not on the elder council, or they're not creating policy for that social grouping. They're just manpower. They're there for building stuff. They're there for hunting and protecting and all that kind of physical activity that needs that physical strength. You know, it's only until you've had that exuberance of life, and for most people that includes, you know, finding a partner, being in a relationship, maybe having children, having a family. Once that's done, once that's established, you get to that point of around your late 20s, early 30s, and that's when you start looking back at what you've done in your life so far, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, is that it? And in a contemporary sense, I feel this is deliberately misinterpreted and presented to the public as a midlife crisis. I'm doing a lot of bunny ears, sorry. Midlife crisis, whereas in reality what it is okay, you've had your initial exuberance of living, and you've been brought into the system, you've been well indoctrinated and molded to be a good cog, and now if you have that spark of sentience within you, you start looking at what you're doing and what you've got, and you're like, well, hang on, what is it I'm doing? So that demographic of like adult teens, 16 to 17 up to early 30s, that is classically the marketing demographic, the political demographic, the intelligentsia. These are the people that not only build the society you live in, but they're the people who have the so-called authority to be participating in the creation of the society that you're going to be living in tomorrow, that your children will be living in. And at the moment, I'm sort of trying to link it back into how we first sort of started talking into this. That is currently being directed in such a way that, as demonstrated by the psychological warfare that we can see going on in this environment, to, in an extreme manner, to snip your ability to think, to box to a very limited degree what you should consider life to be and what reality is, and whether something they show to you is a hoax that you should believe in, or the opposite, you know, the official story that you should not question.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I agree with a lot what you said there about maturity and adulthood, and you know that there's this false sort of view that you turn 18 or whatever, depending where you are, you know, all of a sudden you're a man or whatever, but you have to go through all the processes of living life and all the life experiences to actually have that. And then what happens is a lot of people wake up and then they're working in some glass tower and they're pushing paper or whatever. And that's the midlife crisis, is that they realize, well, I'm just a cog in the machine, and you know, what is my life really worth? And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been really pushing this suspended sort of adolescence on people. It's something I've covered a lot with Supreme Lord Commander and
infantilism.
Sorry?
Infantilism.
Infantilism. I don't know if I'm familiar with that. Could you define that for a second?
It's that principle of either putting somebody in a state of mind or actually keeping them permanently in that sort of arrested development state of mind of being an infant. Infantilism.
Yes, yes, that's, you know, it's excellent. I had a video that I did a few days ago, or several days ago. I hadn't even uploaded it yet to Supreme Lord Commander, but I was examining, you know, and I've been doing this with my entertainment channel, and I'm like, look, you've got 30, 35, 40-year-old men and they've got toys. And I'm not kidding you. You know, like some of the really popular channels out there that are doing this type of entertainment are into comic books, and they collect action figures and all that, and they display their like there's a sort of, you know, standard type of beta male, I guess that's what I've been calling them, beta males. But there's also, yeah, beta females as well, and they are displaying their suspended animation, and they are celebrating that. And look, and also another thing I said is, like, and I wish I had put this video up now because it touches on so many of the things that I'm thinking of, is that, look, we all fall into it, because when we're kids, like I'm a kid, I grew up watching Star Wars, right? And now what is the most popular thing? Well, it's Star Wars, right? So you grew up with those memories, you grew up with that culturally ingrained in your brain, and then all of a sudden, you know, that's what's playing in theaters, that's what's on television, that's what's in the video games. It's kind of hard to resist because that's your culture that you grew up with. And this is what they're doing over and over again. I grew up as a kid reading Marvel comics, where, you know, I had a phase where I went through reading Marvel comics, you know, and now I look, and all the comics that I read are being made in either into movies or television shows, video games, and it's like it's very difficult if you're somebody that likes to be entertained, and, you know, we all have that sort of, I think, that inherent sort of desire to, you know, like I think of like a cat, and a cat's, you know, when they catch a mouse, and they keep the mouse alive so that they can have that sort of, I don't know what the chemical in the brain, but it just keeps coming back again to relive the kill sort of thing. Well, that's what they're doing to people. It's the serotonin, I guess, is the term I was looking for. The serotonin in your brain. So, like, they know how we are psychologically, physically, in every which way, and they know, like, that's why, you know, McDonald's uses subliminal sort of advertising and marketing in order to get you to come to their establishment, buy their food and stuff like that. So when you're driving down the street and you see a McDonald's Golden Arches, there's actually, because of the chemicals that you've ingested by eating their burgers and having their drinks and all that, there's a chemical process that happens in the brain where, and I have it all the time too. It's like, I'm hungry, I want to eat something quick, and wouldn't that be satisfying? And you have to, like, hold yourself off, sort of thing. And I think that's where they've got us. So they're creating people, you're growing up as a kid, but when you get into your teens and you get into your adulthood, you're getting fed the same type of entertainment. It's just, you know, it's you know, maybe the next generation, if you will, sort of thing, but then they go backwards. So you look at the X-Men movies, which is largely about the whole LGBT thing, the gay, it's what the X-Men comics were written about, was about, you know, coming out for being gay people. But you go to those movies, and then they have, you know, like, so first of all, if you're a kid and you grew up and you read the X-Men comics and watched the cartoon and all that, well, then you're going to see the movies because you grew up with all that. But also, I mean, you might be someone that grew up in the 70s or the 60s or whatever, they still had the comics back then, and now they have the movies that actually take place in those generations. So, like, some of the last couple X-Men movies that I saw, the one that came out just recently, and then the one before that, one was set in 1983, and the one before that was set in the 60s. So it's like, you know, like, a lot of people have a hard time holding off, you know, falling into this suspended adolescence, because they hit you in so many different ways, and they're so crap. And then they use the Shakespearean type actors, you know, the great, oh, I love that actor, well, I'm gonna go see the movie, you know, and an Academy Award winner and all this. So there's so many ways that they're able to keep us in this mentality, which really is troublesome when you think about it, because traditionally people would grow up and put away their toys. I grew up, I remember when I was like, I don't know, 11, I put away all my toys. That was it. I was done. I never pulled them out again. You know, and you know, went on to liking girls and, you know, skateboarding and sports and all that stuff, right? But the thing is that you see at YouTube and you look at all these entertainment channels, and they're all in their suspended adolescence, and they're all advertising it. They're all, you know, like, it's like a wonderful thing. They're like, wow, I just got, you know, I did a video the other day, and there's like this YouTuber called Boogie2988, and he's this extremely obese guy. We're talking over 500 pounds. And yet he's a very likable, nice guy. But he's got his action figures, and he's like 40. I'd say he's about 45 years old. He's got his action figures all around him, and he's like, oh, I'm so excited. It's the favorite time of the month. I got my loot crate. So what is the loot crate? Well, it's a box that you buy a subscription. So you pay $30, $40, $50, $100 a month. They send you a box, and you don't know what's going to be in the box. So you open up the box, and guess what it is? Well, it's a bunch of toys. There's comic books and toys, and like stickers. And it's like, you've got this ginormous male who is in his, middle age, and he is all excited about this garbage children stuff. I mean, stuff that's so cheap you probably wouldn't even give as a gift at a birthday party. And it's like, this is what millions of people are watching and consuming and being stuck in this suspended state of adolescence. So I think there are that's what I like when we were talking about this before, and we're talking about how people are all being funneled into this, these YouTube channels and stuff. That is the bigger thing. And we talk about the different social groups that they get into, like Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street or whatever it is. All these things are keeping people in these suspended sort of paradigms that, are comfortable once they get into them, and they feel that there's meaning and substance to them. But ultimately, they're just there to hold you in that sort of prism so that you don't go any further, that you don't have any sort of real maturity, and that's what I see. I find it really astonishing what I see all over YouTube since I started covering the sort of entertainment aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. I think culture creation is one of the biggest aspects that we have to look at. The major events, the sort of traumatic events. Yes, obviously that's part of what's going on out there, whether they're hoaxed or not. It's part of what's being put out into the public consciousness. But I think it's the cultural media, things like entertainment, what is called entertainment, that kind of. I mean, you said the word consumer. It's exactly that, but in terms of brain food. They're feeding you the equivalent of junk food, and they've entrained you such that you get that chemical kickback. You get that chemical buzz because you've been thrilled, like you've been on a roller coaster. So you've watched the latest catastrophism, sensational video where there's all that dramatic music and the world's going to end tomorrow because there's this new, whatever is going to come and blow up the world, and you get that rush, the endorphins and the serotonin, and I can do something about it by sharing this video. Yes, okay. I enjoyed that. That was a good rush.
Well, yeah, I mean the analogy you made to junk food is perfect. It's exactly what it is, because it's an instant gratification. You don't have to work for it. I mean, your brain just accepts it. It's like it's like you're drinking soft drinks. You're drinking the corn sugar, which they put in most of the beverages now, and the corn sugar actually, it actually makes you stupider because it interferes with your neurons. Your liver can't process it properly. It causes obesity because your body is not getting the insulin, or it's being tricked into thinking it's getting it and it's not, and therefore when it does get it, it holds on to it. It's a really nasty thing that they do with these products, and they know that people become addicted to them. They know how to make people addicted to them, and then they know how to manipulate them into buying these products through their their marketing and all their advertising. So yeah, I mean, I think that junk food is a perfect analogy for the junk culture. It's the exact same sort of thing, and it's the exact same outcome that you get out of it, because if you eat junk food all the time, well, you're going to end up like Boogie 2988. You're going to weigh over 500 pounds. You're going to be miserable. You're going to die young. You're going to have diabetes. You're going to have to buy into a really expensive health insurance, which, all these different things. There's no win out of it other than you get to stay in that sort of bubbly state where you don't ever have to accept adulthood. You can just play video games and exist within that sort of comfortable, everything's accessible type of environment. And that's ultimately really self-defeating. And that's what I think that's what they're doing. Like, one of the games that I've been covering and doing a whole playthrough was Grand Theft Auto 5. And I find it interesting that there's three main characters, so you switch between the characters. The youngest of the group is about 35 years old, and the other two are about 45. And I think that's probably most likely the demographic that is playing the game in many ways, right? And that's all purposeful. It's all to say it's okay to continue to be this way because everybody else is doing it, sort of thing. And that is, yeah, I mean, that's how they're able to control people. If you can control their minds, if you control their bodies, and you can make them prisoner to their bodies, because if you're obese and you're miserable, you're a prisoner to your body. I mean, you can't think properly because you're physically sick, and healthy mind, or healthy body, healthy mind, sort of thing. I mean, that's one of the truest philosophies that's out there. So they encourage this terrible sort of lifestyle. And I cover one of the channels on New World Agenda was BuzzFeed. And BuzzFeed is they have a food channel. They have a channel called BuzzFeed Food, and it's all like, sundaes and cakes and, sugar snacks and chips and like all the worst food. Like there's nothing like, oh, I'm going to, avocado with lemon juice and, something really healthy sort of thing. Nothing like that. It's just, whipping cream on top of ice cream with chocolate brownies and fudge. And this is all their food content. And then on their channel, BuzzFeed is all about homosexuality, transgenderism, what it's like to be transgender, how people are, how people react to meeting transgender people, and then how, like, one of the videos I covered. I mean, there's so many men dressing up as women, men trying on women's clothing, men trying women's bathing suits, wearing women's bras, men's, like women wearing beards, like all this shit going on. And these are like some of the most popular. These channels get millions and millions of views. And like there's one video that I covered not too long, well, probably about 6 months ago, in which they were promoting homosexuality, and they had this young couple that were going to go out on a date. So you had two men that looked around 18, 19 years old. And the whole video started off is, do I take off his clothes first or does he take off mine? And then they're talking about who does what, and how they're going to have sex. Do they have sex first or are they going to have it after? And at the end of the video, the punchline was that neither of the two guys even knew the other guy's name, and they were looking on the phone to say, what is his name again? So like they're actually trying to program young men into having these devastating type of homosexual. Now, I'm not against homosexuality, don't get me wrong, but they're promoting to have promiscuous type of homosexuality relationships in which you don't even know you're going to have sex with somebody, you don't even know the person's name, and that's supposed to be acceptable culturally. Yeah. And it's like, I looked at that and I was like almost ready to throw up. I was like, is this, I mean, millions of people are watching this, millions of young kids are watching this. Are they going to think that that's a type of socially acceptable behavior? And if that is a type of socially accepted behavior, where are we socially? I mean, we're might as well be back in Nero's Rome or something, right? I mean, it's just out of this world what they are doing to the youth and how they are programming people and dumbing people down and keeping people in a state of suspended adolescence. And as you said, that infantilism, right? I mean, it's astonishing.
Infant.
Now
as in a small child, an infant.
I thought it was, I thought you said infantilism. I was like, what?
No, it's probably because I ain't got my teeth.
Infantilism, yes, that I've heard that term. Of course, I know that term. So yeah, that's exactly it, and that's one of the things, just one of the many things that you can see in this social entertainment, this beast that we call YouTube, and this is where most of the youth are being funneled into, and this is how they are being programmed into this new world order type of mentality, where it's much more about me and the selfie culture and instant satisfaction, rather than long term and smart planning and career and just trying to build yourself up as an intelligent person that can really contribute to the benefit of all of humanity, sort of thing. And
even in your own small little way. I like the Thoreau quote. Henry Thoreau.
Yep, of course.
You're not here to do everything. You're here to do something.
Yes.
Yeah, there's that I think, again, this is part of that deliberate misdirection for a lot of people who start approaching this kind of information, that you somehow have to be Neo. That you've got no hope of success of bringing down the big great machine unless you're Neo with magical superpowers like a superhero. That can then all link into how the superhero culture has been pushed as a retelling of the older culture of the pantheon of gods and the archetypal aspects. There's a flavor for everyone to suit every demographic, whether you be Superman or Batman or Wolverine or Silver Surfer. Pick your superhero. There's one to suit every taste. So that archetypal appropriation again, so that they can direct you where they want you to go. But I wanted to say, we've been chatting for approximately a couple of hours. So if you want, we can wind it up, I think.
Yes.
I don't like to oversaturate people with massively long conversations because it can get quite burdensome and tends to fragment a bit.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a really riveting sort of conversation here. I've really enjoyed it.
Can I give you an analogy that might amuse you? And I think it links into some of the stuff we're talking about in that sense of consuming food, sustenance, as well as looking at it the aspect of brain food. And then I wanted to sort of wind it up by asking you about, where do we go from here kind of thing. But this analogy, this was, I think initially the intent was this was meant to be an insult when somebody posted this. It's one of again those classic situations of suspicious looking possible sock account, no subscribers, no videos, no content, whatever, just spamming comments in your chat box. But whoever it was, whether man or woman, whatever, said, the truth movement is just like a bowel movement. And they meant it as an insult. And I sort of took it in. I thought about it and I thought, well, actually, that's a pretty accurate description. If you consider what you're consuming into your mind, into your thinking, is like a food. Like the Dormouse said, feed your head. But if you're being just fed shit, then you're filling your gut up with shit, basically. But the truth movement, that process of discernment that we're trying to all learn to do and get better at and help other people get better at, is like you ingesting food, goes into your stomach, gets digested, all the good stuff is drawn out of it that your body needs, and then you chuck out the crap. You excrete the rubbish. And in the same manner, what we should be, I shouldn't say should, but I feel it's a good approach to looking at this kind of information. You're doing the same process with your mind. You're doing the same process with your thinking and energetically. What you're taking in, you're going to get bombarded with a lot of shit in this environment. So you need to digest it and pick out the good stuff and throw out the crap. Stop letting it burden you and slow you down. That's part of what this environment is doing to people. It's quagmiring you into argumentation, fixating you into dogma, slowing down your own progress or steam valving your energy such that you're no longer a potential threat to the system. You're no longer likely to successfully pass on this information, pass on these perspectives, etc. So, it amused me, and I thought it's a good way of talking about that kind of what you consume from a thinking point of view. But from that, and I know you've often sort of gone over this topic of the truth movement and what how it sort of relates to the stuff going on here on YouTube, these social media environments. But where do you think we go from there? I think it's somewhat of a unfortunate situation that this medium has been saturated. It's been well and truly co-opted. It's not completely controlled because, for example, we're here now talking and there's people listening. So they haven't got complete, absolute control. That as well is a misdirection. But it is a polluted environment. You're swimming in a punch bowl full of turds. So how do we progress from there? What is it you feel we can be helping people with, putting out there, you know, that kind of perspective of where do we go from here?
Well, exactly what we did tonight. Having meaningful discussions about important issues, talking about the bigger picture. You know, for myself and you know, for the movement in general, I would say accountability. You know, look, if for people that really are trying to get truth, you know, people that have no accountability for the disinfo that they put out should not be trusted. So you have to use a lot of discernment. So if we're gonna have any success, you know, waking people up, we have to wake ourselves up to all the deceptions that exist within just YouTube alone, or within the dark corner of the truth movement within YouTube, amongst other places, and the types of deceptions and the types of quagmires that people get suckered into. There are people, I kid you not, that have spent every, you know, night of the last year or so, you know, from 6 to 8 hours a night, discussing flat Earth in shows. I mean, I am not kidding. There are people that are, well, I mean, obviously, there's not much that they can contribute to begin with because they're intellectually lacking. But the thing is that don't get caught up in all the bullshit. Don't get caught up in any of the drama. Follow the facts. Use discernment. Do your own research. Do not come to the truth movement to supplement your social life. Not that you can't develop meaningful relationships. Of course you can. I have several really good relationships with folks that I've worked with, but you can't make that your social life, because that is a big mistake, and you don't know who's who, so you have to be careful. You have to be cautious. But yeah, I mean, you just have to start asking serious questions. As I said in my video that you referred to earlier, you should apply the same skepticism to the truth movement that you apply to everything else, to the corporate media, to fast food, or to, you know, the entertainment industry. Apply the exact same. I mean, if you are using skepticism with all those, why aren't you applying that same skepticism to truth channels? And I say to people, myself, I put this challenge out there all the time. I say, you know what? If you come after my work and you find erroneous elements, or you find that I'm getting things wrong, and you present that information for me, you are actually helping me and helping the movement, because I don't want to mislead anyone at any point or time. And if I am, I feel terrible, and then I got to come out, make an apology, retract the videos and stuff. So, you know, judge somebody by their actions, how accountable they are. Are they, like, take a good look to see who's promoting who. One of the ways that you can discern the frauds in the truth movement is, you know, if you could see who they're supporting. So if you see certain so-called truthers that are heavily involved in working with flat Earth channels, well, that should raise your skepticism about that as being a credible source, because they are pushing these psyops into the truth movement, just like they are with the, you know, the Black Lives Matter and the Occupy Wall Street and all that. The exact same thing in the truth movement. It's just a different sort of area, but they're doing the exact same sort of thing. They are dividing people up. They're compartmentalizing. They are, you know, pitting people against each other. There's all these tactics. So you should be cautious. The comment section often is their realm. And when I say their, I'm referring to, you know, the disinfo agents that are employed to attack and create all this division. So that, you know, I've thought about it. I may even get to that point soon where I just might remove all comments, and then see if there's some other place that I could, you know, maybe make a quick web page or something and add people to go there or something. I don't know. But like, the game that is going on is quite sophisticated, but it's also quite apparent once you start to wake up to it. You should question everything. So if you're watching a truth video and they're saying, well, this and this and that happened at this time, and here's this, you should, if you're really concerned about the story and getting to the truth, you should be doing the fact checking yourself, and therefore, and then you'll be able to see if these people are actually giving you factual information. But the movement itself, the best method I think, is for people to try to work more by themselves, just because we don't necessarily know who's who, and we have to understand that once we start succumbing to groupthink, we fall into these echo chambers. We're not actually helping anything. We're making things worse. So I would say, like, if the movement wants to really start to fix itself, it needs to get a lot smarter. It needs to be a lot more critical, and it should apply skepticism to everything. So that means anybody that puts out a claim, if anybody, a event happens, somebody saying hoax, well, apply that skepticism to the person claiming hoax. What is the evidence that they're presenting? Is it solid? Is there, and this is one of the things I say all the time when I watch these, most likely shill accounts putting out this disinfo. When you're looking at an event and you want to determine, whether the information is real or not, you should be questioning everything that is being presented. So if these people are caught and they're misrepresenting, or they're posting false information, or they're, moving the goalpost, or whatever the hell they're doing, you got to recognize that. You got to wake up to it, and you got to, start to use a lot of discernment. The movement needs to get smarter. It needs to be a lot more accountable. There has to be an ostracizing of pure disinfo. So it means stuff like flat Earth and Mandela effect, things that are demonstrably false, that anyone with a functioning brain and a bit of understanding could easily discern as bullshit. That stuff needs to be thrown out. We have to start focusing on the bigger picture. We have to start getting to what these events really are about. If we're looking at the events, we have to look at what our governments are up to. Things like the TPP, big sort of trade deals, legislation that's being passed by your own governments, the militarization of the police forces, we have here in Canada, where we have the amalgamation of border patrol and stuff like that with the United States, the sharing of security. All these things are very, very concerning, and everybody should be very, very concerned about the fact that we're all our information is being collected, and all our metadata is being housed. The effects of this,
studied.
You should be very concerned about things like facial recognition cameras coming into your neighborhoods, things like that, because that takes away all your freedom. You have to guard against things that will give you less freedom. That's the most important things that you can do for your own personal and family sort of well-being, is because once they're able to trace every step you take, and I know that's probably inevitable, the way things are going, but it really does destroy the idea of having this personal sovereignty that we should all be guarding. I think there's no one solution. There's no one fix to the whole truth movement problem. There's going to be shills. There'll probably be more shills. Over the time I've been doing it, it's been growing. So I imagine it's not going to go away. It's, if anything, it's probably going to get worse. So that means trying to discern against the disinfo agents and the tactics that they use, protecting yourself, protecting your personal information, and going back to the sources that are not afraid to admit they made mistakes, have accountability, that don't pretend that they know the answers to everything, and are as skeptical of the truth movement and truth videos and channels that are out there as they are of the corporate media. And that's the sign of healthy skepticism, I think.
Well, can I ask, what do you think of things such as the trivium and learning about logical fallacies and other principles of not what to think, but how to think, and our use of language and how that is used against us?
I mean, you thank God you mentioned that. If everyone could benefit from that type of critical thinking, of that foundation, where that's what the trivium is. It's something that most people never get access to. Building up a sort of strong critical mind, that would solve so many problems. In fact, one of the biggest things that humanity can do to make itself far more successful in the future would be to give the trivium to every kid that could have access to it, and give them that foundation. And then a lot of problems would solve themselves, because instead of having a completely doped up, clueless, mind controlled populace, we would have a populace that would question everything. Then the corporate media wouldn't be able to manipulate us. The frauds on YouTube, the truthers on YouTube wouldn't be able to manipulate us, because we'd all have that foundation. So yeah, that would be for me to solve world problems, would be to give kids and young people growing up today that sort of foundation of knowledge that would make them into proper critical thinkers. And that would be massive.
And one other thing I wanted to ask, and I know this is somewhat of an open question, maybe a bit ambiguous in some ways, but how much time and effort do you think people should put into doing that kind of the research for themselves, the cross-checking of something that they've been shown online, seen online, read online, whatever? I know I'm asking in this sense because I don't like to tell people, like, you should not look into that ever, because it's just wrong, that kind of aspect. I prefer to put it across as well. It's up to you if you want to go and look at it, but I found it to be a waste of time, or it's complete bunkum, or it's just a deliberate propaganda psyop or whatever. But how much time and effort do you think? How do you gauge your attention? Because when it comes down to it, that's a lot of what we're doing here. We're giving our attention to certain things that they're putting in front of us. And in many ways, that's how they're capturing us, like a moth to a flame.
Yes.
They go, oh, look at this new latest event. You should be fixated on this now. And so is there a way of helping people learn? At what point do I disconnect and just go, no, that's enough. You've had enough of my energy. I'm not going to, put any more into it. Thank you very much. I'm moving on.
Well, yeah, that's an excellent question. Ideally, we would want to put no time into it. If we live in a perfect world, but that'll never be. So, like for me, it's a passion. So I obviously put a lot of my time and my life into it. But for other people, that's all up to how much time they can put into these things. And if it's having a negative effect on you, if you're going to bed at night having negative thoughts, or you're depressed, or you're unsocializing, things like that, it's probably a sign that you should stop and you should get away, at least take a break. And every time you do pull away, you learn things, and you refresh yourself, and then you come back. So it's always a good thing to take a break every now and again, especially if you find yourself falling off the deep end. I talked about it just the other day, and I said, look, when I was doing shows, there was some people were so passionate and so sure that everything was staged, and these massive eruptions would happen in these shows and stuff like that. And I was saying to people back then, I said, if that's happening to you, get off. Just get off. Take 2 months or more. Get out, go to the park right away, start sniffing the flowers, and enjoying the nature, and get away from it all, because there's nothing that is going to be beneficial for you when you're in that state. So if you get charged by debating, like I'm one of these guys, I like to debate, so it makes me feel good to have a healthy debate. It makes me, like tonight, it makes me feel good to have a great discussion. So that's a great thing, and I think a lot of other people that will listen to this will benefit from it as well. And then hopefully the good conversations will be sparked from that. But if you're thinking everything's evil, and Satan is in every corner, and everything that is out there, and people are just completely dumb, and you've got this negativity around you, that is bad. Because we have to stop and remind ourselves, those of us who know our history know that we're quite privileged to be around at this point in time, where we don't have bombs raining down on our cities for the most part. and most people can go out and enjoy their lives, even though a lot of people don't. You know, pull yourself away from things when it gets toxic. If you feel that toxicity within you, that is a clear sign that it's having a negative impact on you. So it's personal, it's different, it's subjective. It's every single person is going to have a different whole, you know, set of circumstances and why they're here and how much time they can put in and all that. But you know, when you're starting to think everything's fake, and I know I can go back to like Sandy Hook happening. I was in contact with a lot of Americans. There were people that were calling me and contacting me that were like, they thought the sky was going to fall. They thought Satan was going to step out onto, you know, out of the Oval Office and declare, you know, the fifth age is here and you're all going to live in hell, sort of thing. So, you know, when you're at anywhere near that state, that is a very, very awful state to be in. That is not reality. You have, you know, you're being, you know, you're having this toxicity affect you because of what you're consuming. And that is when you need to pull away, and for a good long time, until you feel completely, you know, rejuvenated and not affected, and then come back with a different and say, what was it before that was hurting me and made me into such a miserable person? I don't want to be in that realm. So there's at no point should you be involved in this type of work if it's making you really depressed. Because it's not going to benefit you. It's not going to benefit anyone around you. It's going to make you more depressed. So, you know, if you're coming in and you're consuming this and taking part in it, and you feel good doing it, then it's a good thing, and therefore, you know, it's beneficial to you. But if it's having a toxic effect on you, then you need to get out right away. Take as long a break as you need.
I just really, really wanted then to burst out with a quote from Jung. You know, you can process the waters of life. You can go where they can't. But it is very much like I see it as, you know, this is my kind of subjective point of view on it. It's very much like the alchemical process. You know, if you're taking in a poison that they have created, that is their attempt to manipulate your thinking, you know, in the same way as like when you ingest something to have an effect, you know, whatever it is you're ingesting and whatever the effect is. But it's the same kind of principle with your thinking, with your mind, with your energetic self. You're taking in this poison that they have crafted, and you've got to process it and purge it out of yourself. And I think a lot of the situation we've ended up with, and why, like you were referencing earlier, how for some people this environment, this truth movement thing that's going on is very much kind of like a tribal sense of solidarity, of coming together, of finding a family, a tribe. It is very much for a lot of the people out there, and I think that is simply because, or inevitably because, of the way they're being disenfranchised by a system that they used to think worked for them until they realized it was actually working against them. But that processing, that kind of purging yourself of this stuff, it is very subjective. I totally agree with you on that. So we can talk about objective truth, but when it comes down to it, like the quantum observation problem, whenever you try to look at it, it gets that coloration of your subjective point of view.
Exactly.
So how do you then describe it without succumbing to the problem of that bias of your own subjective point of view? But anyway, before I go more into kind of like philosophical stuff, I'll wind it up there.
Okay.
Thank you very much, mate, for talking and sharing some of your experiences over the last few years. I think it's valuable for people who are interested in these kind of topics, because you can't be naive about the environment you're getting yourself into if you're wanting to be participating in whatever way you do, whether it's posting comments or making videos or other aspects like creating music. You know, you put out some really good songs to give that kind of cultural meme effect to contest against the status quo. Like I remember Prostitutes, I thought that was brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot that never made it up. But yeah,
But
I mean,
it's those kind of approaches of, it's not just a matter of recounting data information to people like dates and times and names and stuff like that. It's also about countering the cultural manipulations that they're attempting, such as the domination of the music industry into the crap that it is now. And I know I'm not just an old fart. I know plenty of young people that agree with me that this modern music industry is a pile of crap, you know. But there's still plenty of good artists out there, independent artists as well as on labels, that are using their art form, their music or poetry or whatever it is they create, to contest against that tyrannical system.
yes,
So,
and it's
thank you,
one of
mate.
the things. Thank you so much. And yeah, there's always good and beauty out there, and sometimes you can, forget it, and that's when you need to get off and reconnect with reality and understand that there's so much more to the world than just this truth movement. But thank you so much, Cookie, for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to do this again sometime.
Thanks to everyone in the chat. I'm sorry I haven't participated in the chat to any degree. I checked on it a couple of times to make sure it was still rolling, but thank you to the people in there. I hope you've all been excellent to each other and there's not been too much silliness. I know there might well have been, but that is what the chat box is providing for us at the moment.
I think they've been pretty good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks again, Jeff. And I'm glad you're still around. I'm glad you stuck at it. And no matter the harassment, you're still here and consistently putting information out there for people.
Thank you, man. And wish you all the people in the audience, a wonderful evening, and be good to each other. And with that, I will let you go. Cookie, thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening. I know it's pretty late where you are. Morning where you are, right?
Yeah, knocking on 3 a.m. now. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all the best to you, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Thanks, folks. Good night.
Night.